Hi everyone, in today's video we are going to continue explaining a little bit more about the different theological schools of thought that developed during the early stages of Islam. We spoke already about the al-Murjiya and the Khawarij. Today we are going to talk about the Mu'tazila and what were their views, their teachings briefly, so we can have a better understanding of the different movements, the Mutakallimun as they were known, the schools of thought within what is called Kalam, the science of theology within Islam. The Mu'tazila, as I mentioned in a previous video, were the champions of free will, and in fact Mu'tazila, meaning those who stand apart, we know that the name probably came from Wasil ibn Atta, who was studying under a great scholar known al-Hasan al-Basri in the 8th century, and he had some conflicts of understanding, disagreements of theology with his teacher, and he decided to split apart and create his own theology, his own movement of thought. And from here we have the school of Mu'tazila, who developed a rational way of thinking, applying Greek knowledge, Greek philosophy. The traditional schools of Kalam of Islamic theology usually employed the Quran and the Hadith, the teachings and the sayings, the deeds of the Prophet. But the Mu'tazila added to this the Greek way of thinking. And there were 5 important points that the Mu'tazila developed, but 2 of them are the ones that we're going to mention briefly because these are the most important ones, and in fact they were known because of these. I'm talking about the divine justice and the unity of God, Tawheed. And regarding this, according to the Mu'tazila, there are 2 main things to consider regarding the justice of God. Regarding this, how can we explain a just God when we see all the evil and all the bad things that are happening in the world? If we consider that there was a school saying, oh, everything is determined already by God, whatever we do was already written and decided by God. The Mu'tazila said, no, we have free will. Whatever we do, we are responsible for our acts. Therefore we must be held accountable. Now, this is very important because according to the Mu'tazila, if God is all powerful, this is their way of thinking, then they believe that everything is determined by God is implying that God is also responsible for the evil that we see in the world. Why? Because if God is all powerful, He's in control of everything, He's in control of the good, then He must be in control also of the bad. If not, He's not all powerful. Now this is a problem, because if God is all just, how could He be responsible for the evil that we see in the world? This cannot be. Now, the Mu'tazila said, human beings have free will. Things are not determined. Meaning, the evil that we see in the world is simply the result of the mistakes and the sins that the human beings do, the behavior of human beings. Therefore, since the evil that we see in the world is a result of human imperfection and human deeds, therefore, God, who is all just, can really apply His justice in a righteous and just way. Meaning that He's not responsible, humans are responsible for their sins. But this way of thinking was really problematic, because this implies that even the caliphs are human beings, could make mistakes, and therefore even the caliphs were responsible and should be held accountable because of this. Now, the other school that claimed that everything was predetermined or determined by God was in conflict with this idea of the Mu'tazila. And And according to the Mu'tazila, it was very important to have this clear understanding, because if we say that everything God is responsible for evil in the world, according to the Mu'tazila, it looked like they were limiting God's power. And it's a deep more subject that we could even develop further in future videos. Now, the second important point, according to the Mu'tazila, was the unity of God, Tawheed. And there was a conflict here of understanding regarding the Quran. According to the Mu'tazila, they said, look, we see in the Quran that it says that it talks about, oh, God can see things, the eye of God, the hands of God, and these kind of words, according to the Mu'tazila, cannot be taken literally, because this is what is called anthropomorphism, which is the application of human characteristics to God. But according to the Mu'tazila, we cannot believe that God literally has a hand or eye or something like this. No, impossible, because these are simply human understanding. These are words that we find in the Quran and in the Bible and other books for us human beings who are limited in knowledge to be able to better understand God. Other way, it is impossible for us to understand the divinity. So according to the Mu'tazila, this means that when we say that the Quran is also the actual word of God, the actual word of Allah, according to the Mu'tazila, this cannot be taken literally neither. It's impossible according to the Mu'tazila, because if we say that the Quran is the actual word, literally the actual word of Allah, the actual word of God, it is implying that the Quran was not created, that the Quran existed from eternity next to God, because it means that Quran is also part of God and therefore eternal next to God. But according to the Mu'tazila, this is impossible, because we're talking here about two divinities. It cannot be. They emphasize on Tawheed, the unity of God, something impossible. According to the Mu'tazila, they said Quran is the word of God, meaning that the Quran was created by an uncreated and eternal being, which is God. Meaning the Quran was created, the Quran did not exist from eternity next to God. It's impossible according to the Mu'tazila. This is in opposition to another school who said the Quran was eternal with God. Now the Mu'tazila said, look, let's think rationally. When we speak, we have God and the word of God that is coming through his mouth. Okay, but who came first? The speech or God himself? Logically, God himself, because God is the one uttering the speech. Therefore, the speech is created. Therefore, the Quran was created, and the Quran was not eternal with God. Now, this was something very, very important for the Mu'tazila, the unity of God, and they, in fact, won the ear of the Caliph of the Abbasid at this time, because the Abbasiyya took over the Umayyad Caliphate, and the Abbasid, in fact, supported the Mu'tazila for some time, but later on they lose the favor of the Caliphate, and in fact the position that won at the end of the day was the belief that the Quran was eternal, uncreated, the actual and literal word of God. Something of course opposed by the Mu'tazila, and we know that many scholars who oppose this view, in fact, were persecuted and flogged, and many things happened to those who dared to go against this belief. So we have here a kind of clear understanding of these different theological movements that developed within Islam in the early stages in the 8th century. As we mentioned before, the Khawarij, al-Murjiya, the Mu'tazila, and in next videos we are going to talk about the Ash'ariyya and also about the philosophers within Islam. Thank you so much for your attention. This is the end of today's video. In the next one, as I mentioned, we will continue to talk about from a historical point of view and explain more about these different theological movements, as we call it, the science of theology, kalam, and mutakallimun, those who engage in the science of theology, the debate within Islam. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'll see you in the next video. Ma'as salama.